Howdy, LudoNarraCon. I'm Evan here with Feral Cat Den, who are working on their debut game, Genesis Noir. Guys, can you tell me who Feral Cat Den is?
Sure. We're a small independent studio based in Brooklyn. It's me, Evan, another Evan. I'm Evan Anthony. I'm the creative lead.
And I'm Jeremy Abel. I'm the technical lead.
Cool. How long have you guys known each other?
Oh God, since college. We all three of us went to Rochester Institute of Technology.
That's fair. Yeah.
I've known you guys for 15 years or something.
Right. Where in the process did that become Feral Cat Den?
So Jeremy, after we graduated, Jeremy and I went to work at doing digital design, web stuff, motion graphics stuff, and here in New York City, and we just kept on wanting to do little independent projects. So Jeremy and I would collaborate on dumb little things. One time we went and got 40 pounds of dry ice, and it
was 50 pounds.
50 pounds of dry ice, and we just spent a day or two seeing what we could come up with and shoot with that. And we made a little game for our friends, and doing all these little projects with Jeremy and our other pals from RIT that moved to New York. We just kind of threw out this idea that wouldn't it be great to have a barn or a warehouse or some dingy place that we could get for cheap and just spend some time making something. And just the name Feral Cat Den was a description of how trashy that place would realistically be. And it just kind of stuck, and I hated the name, but now it's kind of grown on me.
It's a pretty perfect name, yeah. How many emails have we gotten asking to deal with feral cats?
3, yeah. Nice. So unfortunately, we're not equipped for that, but I always direct people to the ASPCA.
So what did you guys do in college, and how did that how'd that kind of form your roles here?
Well, we studied new media design, which is big fancy websites for advertising. It was all Flash back in the day.
Right.
And I mostly focused on programming and stuff, but I still learned a lot about animation and design and all that kind of stuff, typography, etc.
Cool.
And I think you were similar, but you did way more animation than me, right, Anthony?
Yeah, maybe not way more, but a bit more. And once we graduated, I think we kind of honed in on a specific within listed. So Jeremy has become more of a developer over the years, although he's still a very talented animator and designer. Just not been the focus of his.
Right.
And likewise, I still program, but program like an idiot. And hopefully my animation is decent.
And I will say, for my part, it's been interesting being a part of the process, given that I've been kind of in and out from way back in the beginning, even to the point where it was nascent and things hadn't necessarily come along. I am a writer by trade, and it's been interesting being a language person in a game that for a while didn't involve any language. Nonetheless, trying to get out of food and exploring that within the group, it's been a really interesting journey watching this come to what is shortly going to be its fruition, sooner than later. So can you guys tell me what is Genesis Noir?
Okay, so Genesis Noir, it's a cosmic adventure that takes place before, during, and after the Big Bang. And in order to save a god, you have to stop the expansion of the universe. So yeah, it's kind of a combination of classic film noir and a creation myth. And we get to play with a whole bunch of scientific concepts and science fiction. And it's like Jeremy and I are very interested in jazz and history and like pop science. And so this is kind of we discovered this idea and we were like, oh, we can make so many cool things and learn so many cool things and create a story within this context.
Kind of framework, yeah.
Yeah. So can you speak to some of your greater influences along this? One of the most obvious ones that comes to my mind, obviously, is Cosmic Comics by Italo Calvino, something you had me read a long time ago that did a really interesting job of mixing the scientific realities with an extremely healthy dose of literary flexibility, like poetic choices and a lot of ability to bend reality into something that was an interesting story.
Yeah.
So where have you gone from, either your scientific end or some of the more poetic sides that have influenced you?
Yeah, so that was definitely Cosmic Comics is definitely the primary source of inspiration. And just to give some background on that, it's a collection of short stories. They all begin with a couple, like a paragraph or two that explains a scientific theory. And then it uses that as a foundation to tell a story, not to educate you, but just as a springboard for like imagination. So for instance, stories is called The Distant Moon. And it starts with that the moon was from a tremendous impact between the early Earth and a Mars-sized planet or astronomical body. And this collision fused the two and ejected a whole ton of debris. And some of that debris became our moon. So a very interesting scientific concept. And Calvino takes this idea and he tells a story of the early days after the moon was first ejected and its orbit around the Earth being much closer, so that the lunar forces would pull the oceans up into mountains, and then people could row out up these giant lunar tides and put a ladder and climb out onto the moon. And all the while the moon is getting further and further away and settling into its final orbit. So it's this very like human story of people like depending, or like this home that they have is going further away and things are changing and there's relationships. So it's a tremendous work of literary fiction, very creative and inspiring. So naturally I wanted to rip it off, but like kind of put our own spin on it.
Yeah.
So we kind of like took that framework of starting with some bit of science and storytelling with that, and shifted it into a bit of a film noir concept with the Big Bang, which sounds like a classic film noir,
right,
as like our central concept.
And on the game side, I think probably the big inspiration was a game called Windowsill, which was made by Vector Park. And all the interactions in that game, it's like a puzzle kind of thing. And all the interactions in that game are very direct and tactile, like you're grabbing things and moving them around and spinning things and pulling leaves off trees and poking stuff. It's all very physical.
Right.
We really liked how unique that was and how good it feels to play with and how nice all the feedback is. So we kind of wanted to use that as kind of a starting point for what our interactions could be.
That's interesting. So where in the process did you start developing your visual style then? And starting from either it being you call it a noir, and there's certainly a lot of it that comes from that. Also on the astrophysics side, even, were there pieces in between there that started bringing that visual style full circle with something like Windowsill?
Yeah, so the visual style is very natural. It was like our comfort zone.
Okay.
And like I really like 2D drawing and animation, and we wanted a simple language that can merge 2D animation with 3D environments or 3D characters in a way that they naturally sit together. And maybe you're kind of fooled that some 3D elements are 2D or 2D elements could be 3D.
Mm.
And also just the constraints of making an independent game with just a handful of, just me and Jeremy and then some friends helping here and there, what could we produce? So it has to be quite limited. Can't be like Disney animation, which is extremely labor intensive. And also just naturally, I think this kind of simple line work, obviously emphasis on black and white, is just very well suited to Noir. So there wasn't really a question of like what the game could look like. I suppose the one thing that has developed as the game has been made is that what originally was like very intentionally sloppy has gone a bit more refined. Like there were some ways that I was constructing visual elements or like animating scenes where like I was intentionally trying to keep things very loose. And over time, just the realities of production have led to like actually tightening up some things is actually easier than making things very gestural. So, there's still, it's not like a rigid thing still. It's still like hand drawn, but it in the details of like, oh, do lines always connect? Like the joint of like a shoulder and an arm. Sometimes like I was intentionally leaving that joint disconnected. But yeah, over time, the visuals have progressed to be a little bit cleaner.
Jeremy, along those lines, have you had to make decisions about the way that this game is put together, essentially? Have you started to maybe lean toward one direction or another where it's not just necessarily the constraint, but the constraint of time, but also the constraint of difficulty, and just ways that you found to make your life easier also became canon, essentially?
I'm trying to think. We can cut out palsy time in an edit, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard when you're programming because you want the things you make to be as robust as possible.
What do you mean by robust?
In terms of like if you have to make an interaction where you have to click and drag. Let's say you have two boxes, you drag one box over to the other. Well, there's a lot of ways the player can interact with that. What happens if they drag the box to the edge of the screen? What happens if they slam the box into the other box? What happens if they just click on the box really fast a bazillion times? And those are the scenarios you kind of have to cover. But it'd be nice to cover all of those with equal fidelity, and have it respond in some cool way no matter what you do. But obviously, due to time and production constraints, limiting the types of interactions that the player is allowed to do in any space kind of greatly reduces the surface of the problem, I guess.
Which is interesting because the games like Windowsill and Samarost, for example, they're clearly on the more simple side where they're showcasing essentially a piece of art, and then you're executing a puzzle with that piece of art. I see where they have gone that decision. It seems like you've kind of gone in that decision, but you also have a individual sprite or character whose movement is free, more or less.
Right.
Have you found that you're clamping down more on that freedom as you are progressing?
Yeah, so one of the main challenges that we've had, I guess, is designing large levels that the player is allowed to walk around
Right.
in free space. Like a landscape, like a normal game, effectively, like Super Mario 64 or whatever, where you're running around in an environment and you have full camera control and all that kind of thing. So we find that our strength lies more in fixed scenes where we can lock the camera down, or allowing the player to only move along a certain plane, where we can have tighter control over the visuals and what the camera does. Because we're still kind of, we don't have much experience with designing super compelling, large open spaces, especially.
Right, I can dig that.
Evan can speak a bit more to that, I think.
Yeah, so I think we have full open explorable spaces, and definitely a tremendous to make compelling, so that you can understand the environment, you could wayfind, to make little discoveries, all these little details that go into exploring a space. And also particularly because we're using a very like not isometric camera, but like a downward facing camera angle, which makes it so that, like, for instance, in a lot of like third person games, the camera will be behind the character so that you could see into the distance, and that really helps you identify a landmark that you want to go find. So there's like constructing these environments is greatest challenge. That's something that we haven't really done before. And I tremendous respect for like all like level designers and people who do this, with injury. But it's been really fun to dip our toe into it, and hopefully it'll add a nice bit of pacing to our levels, so that not everything is constrained to specific cameras and scenes, but there's a rhythm of expansion, cutscene, lockdown camera, or composed camera, etc.
Jeremy, I asked you to send me some stuff about what like kind of inspired you, and you sent me these really interesting shader blocks.
Yeah.
Which I'm gonna do a really bad job of describing them, but I'm gonna try and essentially I'm gonna make a relation here between storytelling and simplicity.
Okay.
These blocks and the shaders, they did they're very interesting because it's essentially a microcosm wherein particles interact according to provided rules, and like I remember playing like sandbox games as a kid, and I always thought they were cool, but also they were entirely dependent upon what I was doing. They ended up like being, I mean, they're more physics games than anything else. For me,
you mean like with the sand, the particle sand falling?
Yeah,
stuff?
the particle sand and the water, and like there was always a part of me inside that was running mini dramas in my head about how the water was overtaking the sand.
Right.
The shader blocks that you sent have a much more
do it themselves.
Yeah, they do it themselves. They're more naturalistic feel. You end up seeing this like orange and blue mass slowly expanding over the entirety of the world, but then at some point it grows too large and it is taken over. And I think there's an interesting corollary between us telling the story of something that we're observing versus looking at a story that has a much more defined narrative arc.
Right.
Where did you guys start with something like Windowsill as your inspiration, and then end up with a greater, more defined narrative that you wanted to tell? Like those little stories are actually in some ways a lot more similar to something like Game of Thrones, or even like the greatest monarchic dramas of Europe, or like the Huns, which is it's a long, but like you can kind of attribute those stories to those things that are naturally happening. Windowsill is almost kind of like that as well, but it's more tightly defined. You have more tightly defined shapes. Did you find that you had to more tightly define things because you had a particular story that you wanted to tell?
Yeah, so one of the main things I think that I've seen is that we try to insert more narrative than we had originally anticipated would be required to tell the story
Right.
in any given scenario. Like we would build out a level and then we would play through it and we would have friends play through it and we'd be like, what's the story that we're telling here? What are the key kind of takeaway points? And they would get some of it, but not, there were like details that we wanted to express. So we would need to figure out ways of adding that in through additional props in the scene that were outside of the interaction, that they weren't required or even important to the interaction. They were just little things for you to look at. You kind of inspect up close and turn around and stuff. And I think that's kind of the main thing that I've seen happen, is that we just kind of keep adding a little more of that detail to the world, whereas before it was a little more abstract.
Yeah, the so our two inspirations, or main inspirations, Cosmic Comics has a character that's repeated, but there isn't like a overall plot that connects the short stories. And then Windowsill doesn't have any characters at all or any plot. It's just surreal kind of scenes.
Yeah.
And those are both very compelling, but just me personally, I really like characters. And I knew I wanted to especially create something that's genre-y, like a noir. Having a central plot could be like a direction that would make it compelling to connect these things, and also just more accessible, I think, to like a wider audience. So we could have gone in, I think, two directions. One direction would be to make it completely poetic and not at all like understandable, you know, and we could have gone that direction. We went in a direction that utilizes storytelling and genre a bit more. And I think they're both equally valid. It's just we wanted to, to play with characters and arcs and try our hand at, creating a world and seeing these characters move through it. So, yeah.
To that end, I mean, we're looking back maybe a year plus. This game didn't have any words in it at all at any point. There were like recently within the last year, there's been, you decided to involve descriptions and kind of start using more storytelling along those lines. Do you feel like, what made you change that, I guess? Is it that impetus away from poetry, as it were, or away from ambiguity?
Yeah, well, so we've had language in, I think it's definitely been longer than a year.
Okay.
We decided to add, so what we have in the game is we have item captions, and we have, like in Cosmic Comics, we have introductory captions that set up a scientific premise, and like then the level explores that. And we introduced those after like creating our vertical slice. So that's a term for when you're developing a game or like a property, you create a vertical slice of the experience that captures like a little bit of all the different parts of that experience.
Right.
So that's like a 15-minute of a 3-hour chunk. And our experience after creating that and showing it to people was that a lot of people, like, we had, said these are our inspirations, and I had written like short stories as a way of exploring these concepts in pre-production, and people were missing that. And also we just ourselves kind of like missed the flow of reading and then interacting and then watching, like from a pacing standpoint. I think it's very valuable to have some language. So once again, I think this could have been created in a way that doesn't use any language at all, but then it just gets in the territory where it's purely abstraction. And we wanted to make something a bit more grounded and something that the characters could kind of have a place in as characters, not just symbols.
Yeah.
A bit more approachable.
Yes.
Relatable, etc. I think it tells a better story overall.
Word. So how difficult has it been working as a two-man studio? I've talked with you about some of the difficulties, and you mentioned some of them earlier, just about like the breadth of work that needs to get done. What are some of the larger ones that you've run into?
Well, it's definitely very challenging because we have to wear so many hats. And
right,
you know, like we have to be financiers, producers, developers, animator. You know, we have to do it all. And you know, it's more than just the two of us. We have friends that come in, but it also it's challenging because the way that we've approached this is Jeremy and I are the people who've been on the project full time, and then we bring people on as they're available and as we need them. So that creates some challenges where we have to run them up, and if you haven't worked on a project for 3 months and you're coming back, there's going to be some cobwebs. So Jeremy and I, we've had to create a lot of documentation so that we could onboard people with some kind of reliability. Whereas if we had a team that was larger and all full time, then I don't think we would have to do as much of that. Yeah, and personally also, like Jeremy and I are like really good friends, and like we've collaborated a lot, but like just working full time for 4 years on one thing with one person, it's just like it's like I didn't anticipate like just the relationship changing, like becoming business partners or creative partners versus like collaborators. Not to sound like there's some subtext of drama or whatever, but
it's okay.
We're getting divorced.
Over.
But it's just a very different experience to like come into a place, sit down with someone, you work for 10 or 12 hours, and then you repeat that every day,
over and over again.
Yeah. So that's one thing where it's always a joy to have like you, Evan, come in, or like one of our freelance pals stop into the
anyone
office.
Else.
Yeah. Because there's a tremendous difference between having 2 people in a room versus 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more conversation oriented when there's multiple. There's a bunch of people in the room.
Right.
Which is a good break, I think. But right now we're all separated, so
yeah. Has the last 3 months really changed anything for you guys?
I mean, it's certainly harder working remote, at least without Evan in the studio. I mean, it's the same for me because all of my developers that I work with are, all in Nebraska and Australia and such.
Right.
So that's all pretty similar. But in terms of like keeping me on a good timetable and keeping me focused for 4 hours at a time is certainly way more difficult these days. Than it would be otherwise.
Yeah, it feels good to be in a space and be like, we're doing it together.
Yeah, right. I really hope we don't have to launch this game by ourselves, just like in our apartments. That would make me sad.
Yeah, I think by the time we launch, hopefully we'll, social distancing won't be as constrained.
Right. Are there any striking similarities between being in quarantine and being a 2-man studio in the same place for 12 hours a day?
I mean, yes, our like day to day hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, no, this is still my, yeah, I mean, I still never go out. I still just sit for 12 hours a day. It's great.
Yeah.
Word. Do you guys have anything planned after launch? Is there anything else on your radar that you guys are like excited to get into, or is it going to be just more like relief and then figuring it out?
I think we're definitely going to be supporting the game. You know, this is our first release. I'm sure there's going to be things we'll fix and want to tweak and make nicer. And there's, you know, we want to investigate other platforms that maybe we could bring the game to, and, you know, maybe make some DLC. We'll see. So yeah, I don't know. It's a big unknown. This is our first game, so
we really don't know what the post-launch process is like.
Yeah,
and obviously it's gonna be a great relief when it's out there and we're like, okay, we can slow down for a minute here.
Yeah.
So that'll be nice.
Are you feeling the production schedule ratcheting up as you get closer and closer?
Yeah, I mean, it's just all these little tiny tasks that go into polishing a game, especially for me, and especially adding controller support and just like making sure everything works consistently. And like the cursor disappears when the cutscene starts, and the cutscene bars come in at the right time. And the cursor, when it shows up again, it pops up in the middle of the screen, so you know where it is. And
totally
going through the entire game, and just all of these little things, like making sure the icon's the right thing when you move your mouse over something, and all this stuff. And you know, just the other day I was adding in some more options to the options menu, like controlling how fast the cursor moves when you're using the controller. Making sure that on Xbox there's no exit button, so you have to turn that button off because you're not supposed to have it. All these little tiny things that all add up.
Totally.
You know, spending hours fixing a bug that you would notice for maybe half a second worth of gameplay, but it would kind of take you out of the experience because it's like a little weird hitch or something. But it takes like 2 or 3 hours to fix it.
Yep.
There's just a lot of that.
Word.
So it's a lot less broad strokes than like building fun interactions. It's more just like cleaning everything up and sweeping all the crap under the rug.
Yeah. Do you guys have any advice you'd give to someone who wants to start their own studio, or even just yourselves 4 years ago?
One thing that I'm very grateful for is one, Jeremy. Like as one, like finding a collaborator who is like wants to like stick it through and make something like
Evan, just so you know, I am quitting after this.
But one, like, it's actually very rare to find someone who's very committed. So like, even, you know, I'm very blessed to have many very talented friends, and most people don't have this kind of like dedication. Like most people have shorter kind of time frames. So it's wonderful to be able, you know, if you find someone like that, really nurture that relationship. But also one of the best things that Jeremy did at the beginning of this project, which was not on my radar at all, but was to reach out and talk to people. So I don't know, Jeremy, if you want to talk about
so like before we really started, like before we got a studio space and, you know, made the company and stuff, I was on Twitter like all the time, just making friends in the game community, the indie game community. Like I started doing that in 2013, I think. And we didn't start full-time development until like 2016, I want to say.
Right.
So there was a good like 3 years of just like hanging out with people online, before we even like thought about reaching out to like a publisher or something. And we had met some people, a company called Co-op Mode in Montreal, Canada. We were talking to them, and we had shown them our little short demo, and they were like, "Yeah, you should take this to a publisher." And then they were like, "Game Developer Conference is in 2 weeks. You guys need to go and set up meetings with publishers. We have 2 spare beds in this hostel. You could have them come to this thing.
Oh wow.
And it was like 2 weeks notice, and we had never considered going. We didn't know that this was a thing. I mean, I knew that GDC was a thing, but
Right.
I didn't know that this was the best place to meet publishers. So we bought plane tickets, and we took a week off from our job at Google or whatever, and we went out there and had some meetings with some publishers. Or yeah, I guess it was just like one.
No, we met a bunch.
Oh yeah, no, we did. Yeah, you're right.
You're thinking of the second time we went to
GDC. Yeah, right. And that turned out to be really great, and it was a good idea. It was good advice. So it's interesting, like making those kind of snap decisions where it's like you need to do this thing, and without talking to people and making friends, people who know way more than us, we wouldn't probably be here.
Yep.
Wow. Who else did you end up meeting with in those early days?
We talked to Finji, who are Adam and Becca Saltzman. They're a great resource as well. They've been pretty supportive of us the entire way. And a couple of random companies that we talked to. Felix Kramer, I think, was the big person that I had emailed and reached out to early on. And she turned out to be the scout for the publisher that we eventually sided with. So meeting her was really great.
Yeah. So, especially if you've never been in an industry before, like you want to make make a comic book or make a video game, or you want to, write a children's book. I don't know, any form of like creativity. You got to like immerse yourself in that community, or you need to find a partner who's doing that. Because we were so clueless. I mean, we're still, I'm sure, very clueless. Like, I'm sure, if we do another game, we'll look back at this, we'll be like, oh, could have done that so much better.
Yeah.
So you need to find the people who've done it, and you need to like be a little, be very nice to them, and
I think the key thing for us was because our visuals are so unique that it was really easy to get people's attention initially with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another important thing, is that make sure your game is unique and looks unique, because like the people who are really big in the indie game community, I'm sure they get bugged by so many people every day. It's like, hey, look at my thing, look at this, check it out, blah, 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 from students and others, that you need to stand out in some way. And we did that initially by having a pretty radically different visual style.
Right.
So I think without that, it would have been a lot more difficult to get a foothold.
Cool. All right. Enough of that. What do you guys? Okay, in your downtime, limited as it is right now, are you guys playing anything right now? Are you looking at anybody in particular who's really got your interest grabbed, even if it's just for 15 minutes at a time, to give yourself some downtime from working on this as exhaustively as you are? What's on your radar?
I really want to play Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I don't have a PS4 and I'm sad.
Yeah, I dig that.
I also want to play Animal Crossing, but it's expensive.
Yeah. At this point, like, I hate to say it, but my consumption is really just comfort food. Just because, working so much, and even during my downtime, like the things that I need to do are still running through my brain. So
yeah,
I've definitely gotten big on like really twitchy platformer games. I've been playing Dead Cells a lot recently.
I started that a couple months back, and it is very satisfying.
It is. It feels so good to move around. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
It's nice to press buttons. That's all I want at the end of the day. I just want to press some buttons and stab some little creatures. It's great.
Yeah, Evan, what's comfort food for you?
I'm a Dota 2 addict.
Yeah.
That or like just like I'll play a match and then turn my brain off. And like in the past, Civ, Spelunky, I don't know, they're just like games that you kind of can play a lot.
Totally.
So a lot of the
You
times
don't
I'll
need a lot of emotional investment or anything.
yeah, it's like in the last year I've tried to like play single player narrative games, but usually I just don't have the stamina to like I can't devote like the way I like to play a game is I take a day on the weekend and I play a game and you know I have 8 hours or whatever to like do it and I experience the thing. And I've like started a whole bunch of games. Like I started Pathologic 2 and it's like this is
Yeah, I
so
tried that one
awesome.
too.
And then like I just don't have the time to like consistently immerse
Devote
myself
to it.
and
Yeah.
devote to it. So
Totally.
like once we're done with Genesis Noir and we could take a break, I'm excited to pick up like Pathologic 2. I really want to play that. And,
We want to get a VR setup and do Half-Life Alyx.
oh yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
Really. I want to do Final Fantasy VII Remake. The footage I've seen of that is just it makes me cry. It's wonderful.
Oh yeah. All right. So, what are you guys listening to while you're working these days? Like, what's on your music radar?
I've been listening to John Taverner a lot on loop.
All right.
I don't know who that is.
He's like a Gregorian monk dude from like the 1500s. And it's like really good work music.
Yeah,
Chanting.
Very, very like beautiful arias and choral stuff.
Wow.
I recommend checking out John Taverner.
It's modern people recording his stuff, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't record back in the 1500s.
No, unless they have a time machine, they're not telling us.
Right. God, what was the last thing that I've been doing a lot of audio work in the game, so I can't like listen to stuff at the same time.
Right.
So silence is nice. When it's not silence, let me look at recently played in Spotify. A lot of Don Ellis, apparently. The new Thundercat album. And some Frank Zappa is what I got in here.
Cool. That sounds right.
Yeah. Don Ellis is this 70s and 80s big band jazz guy who he's a really goofy dude. I recommend checking him out.
Word. All right, so I've just got so I'm a chef.
Yeah.
And I have been spending actually a lot of time in this quarantine making food because I'm only cooking for 2 people, so it's not it's easy to control all 3 meals, as it were, because I have a captive audience. What are you guys eating these days?
Absolute garbage. Just like the same stuff I ate before you cooked for us in the studio.
Right.
Just microwave garbage meals.
Is
I
anybody
feel really bad about it.
Is anybody in the neighborhood open near you?
No, they all the places do delivery though, but it's few and far between. So there's like a
Right.
pizza place I'll go to sometimes, but I don't want to go into any delis or anything.
Right. That makes sense.
Just because they're all so packed.
Oh, really?
Well, no, they're not packed, but the aisles are so tight that you
That
can't
makes
really keep distance effectively.
Yeah.
So I've been ordering stuff sometimes, but that's expensive. So
No, I hear you there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, during this time, not cooking as much as I would like. So eating simpler.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the sacrifice that we're making right now is our, it's fun to make progress on our game, but our lives just aren't very balanced, I would say.
Yeah.
I can dig that. Yeah.
So it'll be nice to return to a time when I could cook a dinner with my girlfriend and, not just like something really quick, like pasta.
How are you getting ingredients and supplies? Are you finding that more difficult to like find certain things?
Weirdly, this neighborhood actually has been very accommodating as far as the 2 places that I was already shopping are both open still. So as long as I'm willing to wait in line to go to Mr. Pina, which is this wonderful wonderful like pseudo juice bar deli that has a plethora of cheap vegetables that works pretty well. And as long as like I pick up enough stuff at the old Sea Town, that's it.
Yeah.
But it's strange because I know that there's lines everywhere else except apparently in Williamsburg, which don't tell anybody. But South Williamsburg is the place to be, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed like delis in general, when I do go into them, usually at night, they have a lot more stock than big grocery stores do.
It's because no one thinks to go there. That's the thing.
Apparently, I mean, you can get, like, I remember back when the great toilet paper shortage of 2020.
Oh yeah.
In like a month ago, like all the delis were fully stocked. Like you could get whatever you wanted. You get all the soap and hand sanitizer and whatever.
Yeah. I found that a pretty welcome surprise that at least things weren't going completely off the rails.
Right.
All right, so I got a little this or that for you guys.
I don't know what that means, but go for it.
I'm going to give you a thing, and then I'm going to give you two other things.
Okay.
And you're going to choose one of the two things.
Okay.
All right, how you like your grilled cheese? Tomato soup or chowder?
Tomato soup.
Tomato.
All right. You guys prefer Goose Game or Animal Crossing?
Animal Crossing.
I haven't played either.
Okay, if you had to take one based on the nothing that you know about them.
Goose Game.
Yeah. Who's your preferred? Donkey or zero punctuation for reviewers?
Donkey doesn't provide reviews that are valuable from a do I want to play this, but he sure is funny. And I don't watch zero punctuation at all. But I've seen some of his reviews in the past and I've enjoyed them. But I'm more Donkey in my heart.
I enjoy zero punctuation. I like how critical he is of everything.
Yeah.
So I'm dreaming maybe one day he'll tear our game.
That's really one thing I'm looking forward to. What are the I really want big YouTubers to play the game and give us cool videos. And
have thumbnails of like, oh, I destroy the universe.
Are you guys gonna do like a media blitz? You're gonna send it out to like who are your top 3 YouTubers that you'd want to check this out?
I don't even know. I know who I'd want to cover just from the viewer base standpoint.
I was just gonna say Vanity, but that works too.
Right.
There's one games or like video essay YouTuber or review kind of YouTuber that I've been watching, Grimbeard. He makes really quality stuff, and he doesn't really, he's like kind of small on the viewer counts, but I want to give him a shout out because I've been enjoying his videos.
Word.
He
like does pretty much all like PlayStation horror games though, so like probably not.
Yeah, I've been watching this guy, Matt McMuscles, who's also pretty small in the grand scheme of things, and he mostly does garbage, not bootleg games, but like remember when God of War came out, a bunch of games tried to copy God of War, and we're like, here's our fantastic Roman adventure game. So he like covers all those forgotten games that like came on the tails of great successes.
Yeah.
But still have something weird and fun, kind of janky stuff about them.
Do you consider yourselves on the tails of some great success? And if so, which one?
God. I don't know.
The Third Man?
Good movie.
We're definitely ripping off a lot of like all the Calvino and noir genre, like there's so much about media where you're building on tropes and subverting the expectations or like playing with the expectations. So like we wouldn't be able to tell this story if there wasn't some kind of cultural literacy about what a noir protagonist is supposed to be like, and how we put our spin on that character.
Back to this or that, Chinatown or The Shining?
Is it a movie called Chinatown? Or are you talking about the neighborhood versus the movie?
You know what? You tell me whichever one really more speaks to you.
I'll take The Neighborhood over the movie because I've smelled some things in Chinatown which are so much more horrific than anything in The Shining.
Yeah, that's true.
And The Shining is my favorite horror movie. So
Yeah,
Wow.
I'd say The Shining is also
Wow.
my favorite horror movie.
No
I don't
way.
watch a lot of them, but it's a good one.
Yeah, I dig that. Okay, Half-Life 2 or Half-Life 3?
3.
Half-Life 2.
Word.
Yeah.
Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross?
That's a dumb question. Chrono Trigger, because it's the only one with a coherent friggin' story and characters that are manageable. Like there's like friggin' 30 of them in Chrono Cross. Although the writing's a lot more fun in Chrono Cross because every character talks differently. But Chrono Trigger is much more of a holistic experience.
Right.
Have you played either, Anthony?
Nope. No.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
He hasn't played Earthbound either.
Actually, I haven't played Earthbound either, so I can't help you on that one. Sorry, Chief.
Start. This is why I'm quitting. You haven't played Earthbound.
Okay. Drake or Kanye?
Like Kanye, I guess. There's some Kanye stuff that I enjoy.
Yeah.
Drake.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
I'm letting Kanye know he won the
Kanye
vote.
stole an Aphex Twin sample, and Aphex Twin was like, "Hey, I'll give you the higher quality of this because the bit rate's really crappy on the MP3 you got." And Kanye was just like, "Nope, I'm stealing it." I always thought that was really
funny. If you had to play it for the rest of your life, which would you rather? Sports games or driving games?
Driving games.
Burnout 3.
Yeah, dude. Burnout 3 is fantastic.
That was a lot easier than I thought it would be as far as questions go. I thought I'd split the room on that one.
Because there's so many varieties of racing games, from arcade controls to realistic stuff. And if you've never played the Stuntman series, I highly recommend that.
I remember that one back in the day.
Yeah, it's like a game where each level is like a movie, and you have like 5 scenes that you have to do, and like the director's yelling, and you're like, pass this car on the left, do a drift here, and you have to like nail all these spots in this level, and then at the end you get to see a trailer for the movie that you're making. It's always really stupid and dumb, and they go crazy with the writing, and it's really funny. So there's a lot more breadth. Whereas in sports games, okay, there's 20 different kinds of soccer, but they're all the same. So it's still soccer. You're not like, you might get like backyard baseball or backyard football or whatever, which are like the little kids versions, which were always fun.
Right.
Now the question is, what is Rocket League?
Yeah, good question. Wow. Okay.
Oh wow, that is genuinely the perfect intersection. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
I'm gonna call it a sports game at the end of the day because though you are driving, the driving is in service of the sports.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I gotta say, I think at the end of the day, I'm gonna intersect my own answer to this question. Is Super Mario Strikers offers the best sporting experience of any game that I could literally play into the ground. But I want to see
or Mario Golf for the Game Boy Color.
Something about Mario Soccer Time that really just like Super Mario Strikers was a game that when I first sat down, I mocked it. And then
everyone would.
Yeah, and then I spent some time and it was easy and I had no problems. And then I hit this incredible wall where I was such a garbage failure and understood nothing about the game and had to revolutionize everything that I knew. And only like 6 months later did I finally have the capability of eking a win by the computer. And I have not been able to replicate that success since. So
that's your goal in life now. You gotta keep chasing it.
Yeah, exactly. The tallest mountains are the best ones to climb. That's all I got to say. Is there anybody you guys want to give a shout out to in appreciation throughout all this? Anybody you haven't maybe acknowledged to their face in the last month?
Everyone
really just wanna...
Yeah, I mean everyone who is not on camera right now who's helped make this game. Yeah.
Shout out to Evan Stark.
That guy over there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just the other day I put all the credits data into the game, and I realized that there's like 40 people who have helped make this thing.
That's phenomenal.
And that's crazy to me.
Yeah, between all our localizers, our publisher,
Yeah.
porting house people who are helping us bring it to Xbox. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Skillbard, our musicians.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like,
I hope we get to meet the musicians someday. They're all in London. We haven't met any of them. So I hope we get to do that at some point.
Oh, well, we've met Skillbard, but I think you're talking about
Right, but I mean, like the guy who played drums or the saxophone guy.
Yeah.
We haven't met them yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got for shout outs. It's
All
just everyone in the credits.
Cool.
And my mom.
Yep, moms are great. Thank you to my mom for sending me a handmade face mask.
Yes, I got one of those too.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
What's yours look like?
It's blue and has stripes on one side and flowers on the other.
Mine's green plaid and red plaid on the other side. It's great.
All right, guys. Well, best of luck on the home stretch here. We're all very, very, very excited and anticipating this release. I know that I'm going to play it into the ground, and I'm really excited to see how it turns.
We're going to make you play it into the ground.
Obviously. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool.
Bye.
Cool.
Bye, guys.
Bye.